Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. It's show number 604. It's Sunday, 24th of May, so it's the bank holiday weekend. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my show giving you the updates from the world of motorcycling news, tips and views. Missed a show last week, but back as normal today on Sunday at 11. Right, so what we've got for you today, well, quite a lot actually. The organiser of the Terminal Velocity event, in which a rider attempting a speed record was sadly killed, is in court over what were described as ad hoc safety arrangements. Waymo has pulled its self-driving taxis from 4 US cities after they struck trouble in heavy rain. But the trial in London continues. An extraordinary crash has left a motorcycle dangling from overhead traffic signals. We'll have a quick look at some UK and world news in brief before we move on to look at KTM's new plans for MotoGP. They've renewed their Tech 3 partnership for next season. We'll also have a look at an incredibly expensive motorcycle by Blacksheep Power, £35,000 for an 80-mile-per-hour electric bike. And then we'll meet a couple of ICE engine machines, the Ruby and the Rex lightweight singles from Mac Motorcycles, before the in-depth item at the end of the show, where we look at the forgotten SMIDSY crash. It's the one where the oncoming vehicle turns right into a side road and across the rider's path. Definitely time to remember that one. So grab yourselves a chair, settle yourselves down for the next 40 minutes or so as we run through this series of stories. Right, okay, so let's start with the some in-depth, quick look at some in-depth items I want to talk about. So this is got some new graphics for you. So this section is now called Under the Spotlight. Now, 2 weeks ago, you may recall the last show I was discussing Honda's plan to reduce motorcycle accidents in the UK by 50% in just 4 years. And I dismissed it as entirely imaginary. Now, just a day or two ago, an article appeared in a local paper suggesting that speeding is spiraling out of control in the UK. Now, it started by saying that more than 1.2 million motorcyclists now have speeding points on their licenses. Now, it did neglect to say that there are actually something over 50 million license holders in the UK, though not all of those are active drivers, and it also includes those with a provisional license. But the simple sum shows that if you look at full license holders, well over 80%, 4 out of 5 do have, in fact, a clean license. Anyway, the article says that the total number of people with speeding tickets has increased by 20% in the last 2 years. And they say that it's down to increased speeding enforcement. Now, it's likely that what they're talking about here is increased rollout of sort of the camera-based enforcement infrastructure, which includes average speed cameras, the smart motorways where the variable limits are enforced, camera vans, new high-tech cameras that are being placed on streets in London, for example. There are also red light and speed combined cameras, which has caught people out in the past. And there's also AI processing, or AI assisted processing, I should say, of the captured image, which basically speeds up the detection rate. Now, there is also some evidence for increased prosecution volumes, with DFT statistics showing that fixed penalty notices and speed awareness courses, the referrals to those have gone up significantly since the pandemic. And camera detections now form the overwhelming majority of speed ticketed cases. But, is there another deeper problem here that we're perhaps missing? And, my question is there actually increasing confusion over what the speed limit actually is, which is actually causing drivers to exceed the limit? Now, over the last decade or so, we've seen a huge expansion in lowered limits on main roads and in towns. Wales, for example, has now got blanket 20s through their urban areas, except on a few roads. Here in London, we have urban 20 schemes, but the introduction is piecemeal. It's all based on local authorities. And the very obvious consequence is that speed limits have actually become increasingly inconsistent and less intuitive, often with minimal visual change in the road environment itself. Now, I'm just going to put a picture up here, give you a zoom in on that. And this is an example. Now, this isn't a Google image from Google Maps that I pinched. It's dated from August last year. Now, I was driving up this very road just the other day, and I discovered about this point, you can just make out the lorry symbol over on the left-hand side here, the lorry line. A new 20 limit has appeared here. Now, there's no obvious change in the road. It's a residential street, a busy road, there are houses either side, there are businesses. We're just actually running past a tyre fitters, if I remember correctly, and it doesn't change materially as you go forward. There was no warning, no new speed limit in force sign, and incidentally, my sat-nav didn't pick it up, and neither did my partner, who happened to be driving at the time. Did she spot it? Now, the interesting thing is, of course, if you actually look closely, you can see that there is a speed camera just up the road. There it is, slap bang in the middle of the screen there. So that is positioned neatly to catch anybody who hasn't actually managed to detect that new 20 limit. And as I say, with no obvious change in the road, I do wonder how many snapshots that particular camera has taken over the last few days. Now, this actually matters more than most road safety authorities, I think, are keen to admit, because humans do estimate speed contextually, and we do it subconsciously. We use things like the road width, our sight lines, the number of hazards we detect, the density of junctions along the road, and traffic flow too, to infer what feels appropriate. Now, in fact, historically, UK speed limits were actually broadly aligned with road appearance, and increasingly they aren't. Now, at the same time, vehicles are quieter and smoother, particularly at urban speeds, but the new tech speed detection systems which are being fitted to vehicles don't always work reliably. Now, a new minibus I was driving just a couple of weeks ago, it suddenly alerted me to a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on a motorway. What it had actually spotted was a 20 sign on an entrance to sort of the roadside, a works entrance, which actually ran parallel to the motorway. The exit, the slip exit off to it, was just behind me. So the 20 was to control speed into the works. Now, you know, what makes me think that drivers are being caught out by these less than obvious speed limits too is something of what might be a change in the way that speeding points are being delivered across the cohorts of drivers. It's middle-aged and older motorists, people with, in some cases, decades of driving experience, who are starting to pick up tickets like this. And it may be that they are the ones who are most likely to be driving, to these learned environmental cues rather than continuously scanning for every single changed limit sign. Now, it doesn't mean the limits are wrong, but it does suggest that the issue may be more complicated than the usual explanation that drivers are inattentive. And if that's true, simply issuing more penalty points doesn't actually address the underlying problem. If you want drivers to slow down, they have to know what the speed limit is. Now, here's an interesting graph that my brother actually sent to me. Oh, where has it gone? Let me try and find it. Hang on a minute. I had it here a second ago. Just get this up on screen for you. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like? Sorry about that. Once again, I had this all set up and it's gone pear-shaped. So frustrating. Right, screen, application, window, graph. There we go. That's finally up on screen. So have a look at this. This is the share of electric car sales in selected countries and in regions where the share currently exceeds 10% of all new car sales. And what it also shows you is how the proportion of electric car sales has changed since 2020. So the data is from last year and it goes back to 2020. So let's try to show you some of the detail points on the map. Have a look there. Top of the list is Norway. Now, 2020, 75% of all electric vehicles in Norway were electric. That figure has now reached the astonishing level of 97%. So in other words, just 3% of cars sold in Norway are now petrol engined or diesel engined. Even more astonishingly, in some ways, is the truly astonishing growth from the country in second place, and this is Nepal. They've gone from just 10% of electric vehicles sold in 2020 to a fairly remarkable 68%. So over 2/3 of all new cars sold in Nepal, a small country in the middle of the Himalayas, are now electric. Singapore has also experienced a big jump. Iceland has gone from 52 to 63%. China's gone from a lowly 6 to over 50%. Vietnam is another one, the country which has grown significantly, 0 to 41. And then we get to the UK, 11% to a jump of 35%. So still a significant improvement in the number of electric cars sold, more than 1 in 3. And if you scroll right down to the bottom, you will see the United States languishing in last place. It's jumped from just 2% to a miserable 10% of new car sales. Right, that is electric car sales across the world and how they are growing. Sue's looked in and said, good morning. Morning, Sue. Nice to see you. Right, okay, so moving on rapidly, if I've got my photos in order, we have the weather for bikers. There we go. So it's another year and it's more record-breaking temperatures, but unusually it's actually happening on a bank holiday where we're far more used to sort of rain and wind. Anyway, most of the UK today will see plenty of sunshine and it will be hot in the southeast. Unfortunately, if you happen to be in the central and northern Scotland, it will be cloudy and much cooler. Temperatures up there no more than about 14 or 15 degrees in central Scotland, where it's likely to be approaching 30 here. And there'll be some rain floating around up there too. Now, after a warm night across much of England, Monday will see sunshine for most, and it will be turning even warmer. Exceptional heat for the season in the south, topping 33 Celsius. It'll be cloudy and breezy still across the far northwest, though. Periods of rain, mainly in the morning. Now, Tuesday sees the same kind of split, another very warm day for southern England. It'll be dry in the morning across the UK, but some thundery showers could develop later in parts of western England and Wales. Now, on Wednesday, there is a bit of a change to the weather. The high pressure moves somewhat, and the winds will change direction. This is going to bring much cooler weather to the east coast, dropping temperatures back possibly to the high teens. So it'll feel much, much colder. It will still remain very warm, though, across western England. Thursday and Friday looks set to stay sunny for the eastern parts of the UK. Possibility of some thundery showers in the west. Cloud continues, unfortunately, to affect the far northwest. Temperatures will remain average in the above average rather in the south and east. So again, warm towards the weekend. Right, so exceptional weather for the time of year here in the UK. Right, okay, let's move on with some news. Now, you may remember back in 2023, Elevenses reported on the death of Martin McConnell. He died when his bike left the runway and crashed at 214 miles per hour during a high-speed trial run. He was attempting a record, and it seems that he ran out of runway, left the prepared surface and crashed. The coroner later recorded a verdict of accidental death. Now, this event took place at Tibbenham Airfield in Norfolk, and the organiser is now up in court accused of health and safety breaches. Now, court has heard allegations that a risk assessment may have been produced after the incident, that marshals had received no formal training, and that there was no written emergency plan in place. The organiser denies any wrongdoing and says safety was always the priority of the event. Now, none of that necessarily means the event itself caused the crash. At those kind of speeds, even a small error is likely to become catastrophic very quickly. But the wider perspective here is important. Whenever anyone organises any kind of event for motorcycles, doesn't matter whether it's being ridden at extreme speed, there's a responsibility that goes far beyond simply providing tarmac. There need to be realistic risk assessments, there need to be trained marshals, there needs to be emergency planning, and there needs to be a realistic preparation for what happens, what you do when things go wrong. And in some ways, that's the bigger story here. Now, Waymo, Google's self-driving car division, currently testing its driverless taxi service in London, has temporarily halted the robo-taxi operations, which had been rolled out previously to 4 US cities: Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. Now, the suspensions appear to be due to the vehicles having difficulty navigating during heavy rain and on flooded roads. And it actually follows a recall of approximately 3,800 Waymo cars for similar issues. Now, the company confirmed that an unoccupied Waymo vehicle, encountered a flooded road, and it stopped in Atlanta during intense rain, and this led to the withdrawal. And Waymo, Google reiterate that safety is their primary concern. Now, despite these challenges in the US, Waymo is planning a public launch in London as soon as September, pending regulatory approval. The Department of Transport says there is a potential to reduce accidents and offer independent travel for disabled and older adults, although why they can't simply jump in an Uber or some other cab like black cabs, I do not know. Reduce accidents? Well, I think that is still to be proven. Now, here's one of the strangest photos I've seen in a long while, if I can find it, and it's gone out of order. For heaven's sake. All right, sorry about this. I thought everything was all in order, and it appears not. So let me try again to get this sorted out. Where the pictures disappeared from the list of pictures. All right, I'll try and I'm not sure where that's gone. Well, basically, I'll try and describe it for you. The photo showed a motorcycle hanging from a traffic signal in British Columbia in Canada after a collision. Now, it's one of these American-style traffic signals where the lights are on a big bar which actually crosses the road. So it's basically an overhead sign rather than a traffic light at the side of the road. And the motorcycle was hanging by its front wheel. The bar had slipped up between the front wheel and behind the rear axles ahead of the frame. Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw it, my first reaction was that has to be AI generated or possibly some kind of stunt where somebody's hung the bike from the traffic signal sort of in the middle of the night or something. Because the bike did appear to be probably intact, it's suspended several meters in the air, and it's exactly the sort of surreal image we've kind of become rather disinclined to trust in the current sort of era of AI. But having looked into it, it does appear the incident was genuine. The crash happened last Saturday afternoon. It was reported by multiple credible outlets, including CBC News. Confirmation from local police and firefighters as well. They attended the scene. And the Delta Police Department reported that the motorcyclist was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries, and the driver of the car that he hit was uninjured. The unusual scene, it drew crowds of onlookers, many of whom pulled out their phones as the emergency crews tried to remove the bike. One eyewitness was headed for a nearby Krispy Kreme donut shop and said, "Never seen anything like this, like seeing a movie." Another said that having spotted the damaged car in the middle of the road, he began looking for another vehicle that might have been involved in the crash. "I was looking down and then I looked up and the motorbike was above. Kind of crazy." The firefighters did eventually get the bike down. Now, the reason these incidents look fake is that our brain expects crashes to actually end up on the road surface, but from the dynamics perspective, outcomes like this are actually possible. Motorcycles are relatively light, but still carry significant kinetic energy, and if the impact does happen at the right angle, the bike can become airborne and can follow some genuinely odd trajectories. Now, it did remind me of an old Isle of Man TT incident at Waterworks Corner, where a crashed bike actually ended up lodged in a tree. Again, it's one of these things that sounds impossible until you remember the sort of speeds and energies involved in road racing, which makes me wonder how fast the motorcycle in the crash was going. Anyway, the reality is it's actually a weird scene of a genuine accident, and in lieu of having the photo here, what I can do is I can give you the link to follow and have a look at in your own time. So there's the link going up now. You can follow that one and you'll see the incident in full. Right, time for a quick break. Show if you've not already done so. Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses. They can watch on catch-up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all the links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com, or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it when the show's over, of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay, so on with some news in brief from around the world. Now, Harry Hudson, an up-and-coming British cyclist, he rides for the Little Trek Development Squad, which means he's on the fringe of the main team, and he won the junior road race title in 2025. Now, unfortunately, he's been injured in a training crash that involved a motorcycle. He was apparently descending on training roads near Girona in Spain when the crash occurred, and he described it as pretty scary. He was taken to hospital for observations, where scans confirmed he had a compression fracture to his T8 vertebra, and he has been discharged to recover at home. His recovery timeline remains unclear. Now, if you like hooting at people to attract their attention, think twice, because a white van driver has been handed a £266 court bill after he ignored the chance to pay a fixed penalty fine. He was spotted sounding his horn outside Braintree train station in December last year to attract the attention of a friend. Jamie Spence, 52, he was reported by an Essex police officer quote, sounding an unauthorized audible warning instrument on a vehicle. That appears to be the official offence. Now, the officer's statement was read out in Colchester Magistrates Court, and he said that the driver had hooted, quote, a number of times to try and get the attention of a friend, not for the purpose of warning other road users. Spence pleaded guilty in court. He was handed a £146 fine and ordered to pay £120 in costs, but he wished he'd paid the fixed penalty. Now, why haven't we got the picture on the stage? Oh, for God's sakes. There we go. That was where we should be. Now, it appears that they're still waiting to be ratified, but it seems 2 world records for motorcycles were recently broken on Pendine Sands in Wales. Thornton 100 motorcycle founder Jody Millhouse apparently tweaked a damaged Triumph Bobber 1200. It was shipped in from the US, and he modified it, and the bike has apparently achieved a quarter-mile run, topping out at 106.98 miles per hour and 132 miles per hour at the half mile. And again, have an official video here that you can watch if you want to from Thornton 100. And that's just going up on screen now. So that'll tell you a little bit more about this story. There it goes. And in New South Wales, the authorities are introducing tougher rules for novice motorcyclists. These will come in on July the 1st, 2026, so not very long at all. Learner riders will be required to wear approved high visibility vests or jackets, and both learners and provisional riders must also wear certified protective gloves. Now, the New South Wales government describes this as the biggest motorcycle safety overhaul in nearly 20 years, and it's aimed at improving rider visibility and reducing injuries amongst inexperienced motorcyclists. So same old story. If drivers don't see motorcycles, the story is make them more visible, despite all the evidence suggesting it doesn't actually do very much. Bit of a shame, really. I should have read Sights Are Being Seen. Anyway, non-compliance will carry fines and demerit points, not sure what they are, alongside existing restrictions and lower speed limits, zero alcohol tolerance rules, and there will also be learner-approved motorcycle rules updated. I presume demerit points are like our points on the license. Now, KTM, they are keen to tell the MotoG paddock that their crisis phase is over, that the racing program is secure, and they still see MotoGP as central to the brand's future, because they have just renewed the Tech 3 partnership into the 2027 season. Now, only a year or so ago, you'll recall, there were genuine questions over whether KTM's financial issues might force them to scale back racing activity, even rethink their MotoGP participation altogether. You might remember they laid off their development rider, Jeremy McWilliams. Anyway, they now say they are fully committed to MotoGP and have done it despite turning down an offer from an outside investor who would have taken partial control of the team had the scheme gone through, despite the offer being in the 9-figure range. Now, CEO Gottfried Neumeister, he says KTM and their majority owner Bajaj decided they wanted to retain full strategic independence rather than sell a slice of the race operation off, despite repeated approaches from a number of different investors looking to gain a chunk of the KTM team. You may recall Lewis Hamilton's name had also been linked to a potential buyout. Now, it's unlikely this would have happened without some underlying recovery following KTM's restructuring. And although I haven't seen any specific figures, new owners Bajaj Mobility, they are apparently saying that revenues and bike sales have improved in early 2026. And KTM says that this financial turnaround is what gives them confidence to keep the factory racing funded by themselves. Now, from a MotoGP perspective, this is probably the clearest signal yet that KTM do intend to stay on board for the long haul, particularly with the rather significant 2027 regulation changes. MotoGP machinery, you'll probably know, will switch from the current 1000cc bikes to new 850cc machinery, and KTM management actually have confirmed that their engineers were working on the next generation bike, even while the company was going through its restructuring when they hit financial trouble late in 2024. Another question that I've seen asked is the KTM team likely to rebrand as a Bajaj? It may seem odd for Bajaj to pour cash into a race team that runs under another name, but KTM's sort of ready-to-race identity is actually built around their sort of racing credibility. So a Bajaj GP team would actually lose that sort of emotional and aspirational value, I guess. But it doesn't mean you won't see progressive. Right, quick break while I have a cup of tea. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my Coffee pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Skills ebook shop with instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to ebook versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, I've actually got the right graphic up this time. We're going to have a look at some motorbikes. So what news have we got for you today? Well, recently I heard a saying to the effect that price is what you charge when you've run out of specifications. I'm not quite sure what that means, but presumably it implies that you just make the thing more expensive and hope that people think it's exclusive. Anyway, I've no idea where that one came from, but it did spring to mind as soon as I saw the new Blacksheep Power 1 electric motorcycle, which is being unveiled at the Bike Shed Moto Show in London in the next few days. Let me give you a zoom in view on this beast. Now, under this rather industrial looking bodywork sits a modest electric drivetrain. It's an A2 license compliant 47 horsepower with a top speed limited to just 80 miles per hour. 47 horsepower should take you a lot quicker than that if it's fully available. And the bike has a relatively small 6.2 kilowatt hour battery, which offers just 100 miles of, quote, city range, unquote. So if you're riding the thing at any kind of speed, I suspect you probably expect just 40% of that. For context, a Zero SRZ or a live wire, they deliver high performance and longer range from a significantly bigger battery. The zeros are the big zeros are sort of 15 kilowatt hours. Even the 2-hour charging time isn't exceptionally quick. Now, all this would be reasonably acceptable, I guess, if Blacksheep capitalized on the low specification to deliver a low price point for a city runabout, but no such luck. This thing costs nearly £30,000 plus VAT. So realistically, you're looking at around £35,000 on the road. And they actually want £1,000 up front, plus VAT, I think, before they will even put you on the waiting list to build one. So it's extraordinarily expensive, I would say, for the performance on offer. So what are you actually paying for? Well, Blacksheep answer is engineering, artistry, and exclusivity. The bike is heavily promoted because it has an unusual wire-free power delivery architecture, which is somehow integrated into the frame itself. Be interested to know how that works. Presumably half the frame is insulated from the other half. I don't know. And it uses a lot of CNC machines, billet aluminium, and stainless steel components. Yes, expensive, but hardly exclusive. Visually, well, I would say that the Blacksheep claims to create electric motorcycles that showcase engineering rather than hiding it behind plastic covers. Whether that's beautiful to you is entirely subjective. My first thought was that somebody started to build a motorcycle out of a Meccano set and then finish it off with Lego Technic parts. Regardless of how Blacksheep plan to build only 50 units, I think it's hard to see how they'll find 50 owners willing to take part in the sale and collect this piece of collectible industrial art. My take, projects like this really only lend power to they'll never place the internal combustion engine argument that so many motorcyclists firmly believe. Right, okay, so let's have a look at a couple of petrol engine bikes. Now, Mack Motorcycles, they have officially opened customer orders and test rides, and they're attempting to make the jump from sort of interesting idea to production reality with two new lightweight singles called the Rex, which is an upright sort of flat tracker, and the Ruby, which is a cafe racer. So let's have a look at the Rex first of all. Let's zoom on it. There it is. Now, both machines, they feature a sort of minimalist design architecture. You'll note the hole under the seat, one of my pet hates actually. The bike completely emits electronic rider aid, so presumably it has ABS, as that's a legal requirement, I think. And they say this minimizes weight, and the bikes weigh in at just 150 kilograms oil on board, but no petrol. They feature a 760 millimeter seat height, and they use a 1430 millimeter wheelbase. Now, if the name doesn't ring a bell, it's understandable. Mac have had a bike around apparently in concept form for years, even built prototypes, but this is the first time they appear to have had something ready to cross over into genuine customer production bikes. So what was their design brief? Well, they wanted to exploit a robust and torquey single. They wanted to make it as light as they could, but to use a traditional tubular frame. They wanted confidence-inspiring handling, nimble in corners, stable on straights, nothing surplus to requirements. They wanted to value, quote, the grey hairs of time-served craftsmen and proper engineers. They wanted it to be easy to live with, simple to maintain, uncompromised quality, a British product to be proud of. Well, the result is certainly a lightweight, minimalist motorcycles, but they're both wrapped around the 600cc 4-valve dual overhead cam single-cylinder engine, which is sourced from the Italian manufacturer SWM, who apparently have them, as far as I know, built in China. So not quite so British as you might like to think. This is the Cafe Racer Ruby. Power output is decent. It's about 57 horsepower. That's up 5 from the original, thanks to a proprietary engine map and a UK manufactured electronic control unit, which paired with a Mikuni throttle body. Now, power is delivered via a 6-speed gearbox. Outright speed clearly isn't the intent of these bikes. Max say it's around 100 miles an hour. I would guess it's probably good for 115, though I think the engine has something of a reputation for being rather vibey at high revs. Now, the machines share the tubular steel backbone frame. It was originally designed in collaboration with Harris Performance. It's built by Caged Laser Engineering, and the SWM single is a fully stressed member of the chassis. The wiring harnesses, the fuel injection, are routed below the spine to sort of keep them out of sight, and the Acerbis fuel tank carries 16 litres. There's a bespoke radiator from a British firm specialising in custom Land Rover applications, which is engineered to fit in between the down tubes. Now, the specs fairly serious. That you can get Brembo or Held brakes. I believe you can specify which you like. Nitron suspension, stainless exhausts. A lot of emphasis, obviously, on the craftsmanship and bespoke assembly. Wheels are 120/17 up front, 140 or 150 tires on the rear. 17-inch, and they run on polished rims with stainless spokes, but I think from examining the photos, as far as I can see, both are actually tubed. I stand to be corrected on that if I've got that wrong. Now, I was immediately reminded of CCM. That company went into receivership last year, and I did wonder if they'd actually purchased some tooling, but it does appear that the original concept goes back as far as 2009, when they were intending to use the 500 single-cylinder motor from Buell that powered the short-lived Blast. So I'm wishing Mac luck, but I do suspect their struggle will be to make the concept of this sort of boutique machine actually pay off. The guide price for both bikes is set at $15,500 inclusive of VAT, so rather cheaper than the Blacksheep, but it's still rather more expensive than many people will want to pay for a sort of a modestly powered bike. I do wonder if this sort of boutique bike ship has actually sailed. Right, okay, and on to the final section of the show then, when we take a look at something in depth. And I have a new banner for you as well: watch, think, and ride. So today's topic is to look at the forgotten SMIDSY crash, which I think it's time to remember. And unfortunately, this was brought to mind by a court case in Fife involving the tragic death of a motorcyclist called Barry Hunter. Now, it's unfortunately a typical example of this crash which rarely gets the attention it deserves. Though it's nothing like as common as the traditional SMIDSY, which involves a car that pulls out of a side turning, the crash that kills Barry accounts for a significant proportion of serious and fatal motorcycle collisions at junctions. I did a bike safe course some years ago, and I was astonished to discover that, in fact, it's this crash that kills 50% of riders in London. So here's what happened. The facts are fairly straightforward. Mr. Hunter was riding his Suzuki in Rosyth when a car driven by one Louise Carruthers turned right across his path at the junction. Now, she wasn't coming out of a side turning, she was turning into it, and the impact proved fatal. The driver did admit causing death by careless driving, and the CCTV footage was shown to the court. Now, on the surface, this is yet another SMIDSY style crash. Sorry, mate, I didn't see you. That's the shorthand used to describe these collisions where a driver fails to detect an approaching motorcycle at a junction. But the shorthand hides a rather different and under-discussed mechanism. In this case, the right turn is across the path of a motorcycle from the opposite direction. And it really is worth separating this out, because most road safety messaging around junctions focuses heavily on the driver, but the driver looking properly left and right. In other words, the driver is in the side turning and they are doing their checks for a motorcycle approaching on a main road. Now, for riders, when they hear that kind of messaging, it creates a sort of false sense that the only problem at a junction is when they encounter a car that is waiting to emerge from that junction. But logically, what comes out must have gone in at some point in the past. So it's worth remembering that this right turn across the oncoming bike's path from the opposite direction scenario really does exist, and several things make this situation uniquely dangerous. Now, first, it's the geometry. The motorcycle is typically approaching from head on or near head on from the driver's perspective. So what that means is there's little in the way of lateral movement to make the bike obvious in peripheral vision. Even when the bike is approaching on a main road and the driver is sitting in the junction, there is a phenomenon called looming, where the bike suddenly moves laterally across the driver's view. It happens at the last moment, but it's sometimes the moment which the driver does see the bike and slams the brakes on. But when we're driving straight towards an oncoming driver, there's no lateral movement. Now, secondly, there's something of a perception lag here. Now, drivers, we're not tracking every vehicle in real time. We're kind of sampling an environment, building a mental model, and then acting on it. And this works two ways. Firstly, if the rider is approaching the driver at speed, remember, coming in on that head-on collision, the gap between the sort of gap looks safe and the gap isn't safe decision is surprisingly short. And the problem is that if the driver even slightly misjudges the motorcycle's speed and distance as it comes towards them, they will begin to turn on inadequate information. And thirdly, the same kind of problem for the rider. If a car pulls up on our left and comes into our view at a junction, we see that lateral movement. It tends to draw our attention. We're less likely to see it if it's just sitting there already, but if we're looking in the right direction, we should see that car approaching. But when the car is coming directly towards us from the other direction, once again, there's little to attract our attention, and we may not even realize that that car is actually turning, particularly if, indicators and things are often hidden by bright headlights these days, where it can be very difficult to see. So the only warning that we have on the motorcycle is the moment that car starts to turn across our path, and that happens late, and by the time we recognize it, the car is already in our path. So we often have no meaningful braking window to take evasive action. The collision's almost unavoidable unless the rider has assessed the situation early and pre-committed to slowing down and being ready to brake. Now, fourthly, and this is important for motorcyclists, the outcome is effectively a partial head-on collision. And that happens because the car, of course, as it pulls forward, is moving partly towards us at the point of impact. And that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be moving fast, but what it does mean is we have to add the car's own kinetic energy to our own kinetic energy that we're carrying at the moment of impact. And this is why, from the rider's perspective, this is often one of the most unforgiving types of crash on the road. And the trouble is, despite, as I say, despite how common this crash is, it's still, it may be only 1 in 10 or so of all SMIDSY collisions. It does result in significant injury and fatality rates. It's kind of bundled into this generic message about being seen, making eye contact, drivers looking properly. So for the rider, the key issue is not really conspicuity, whether you're wearing the high-vis clothing that New South Wales seems to think riders should have, or whether even you are changing position to see more. It's about predicting what might impact on the rider's open space in front of them, what may move into the path. Can you be confident, in other words, that the empty space that you're aiming for in your lane between the side turning and an oncoming vehicle will still exist by the time you get there? If it looks like the vehicle could arrive at the point at which you want to pass the sort of the mouth of that junction at the same the same moment, then we need to be right on our alert. So this really should raise an uncomfortable but an important point for road safety messaging. Generally, if you are talking about road safety, if you are talking about the SMIDSY crash as an emerging vehicle crash, you really need to refocus and mention the turning in crash too. It really changes the traditional SMIDSY narrative. This is the reality. Roads are rarely single direction. They're mostly bi-directional flows, and every junction where there is an opportunity for a vehicle to emerge in a two-way road is an opportunity for a vehicle to turn in too. So the key defensive concept here is not just to assume that they haven't seen you, but to remember that the gap in front of you is the key point. If that gap can be filled at the moment you reach it, you're in trouble. And the Barry Hunter case, sadly, is not unusual in its mechanics, but that unfortunately is what makes it useful as a discussion point. So think about how you consider approaching a SMIDSY yourself. And look not at the vehicles entirely, but think about whether the gap is going to stay open. It's not a mysterious crash. It's entirely predictable. It happens more often, than we might think, but it is not fully addressed in how we talk about junction risk on motorcycles. And these are the problems that for motorcycle safety we have to get right. Okay, so we've got a couple of comments here. Sue says, well explained, thanks Kevin. My mum was victim of one on her moped, ruptured her spleen. Oh, that's a nasty injury. Sorry to hear that, Sue. And Sue also says we have to wear high vis if with a school, and of course we have to wear gloves. Should be law to wear gloves on a motorcycle. Why isn't it? Yes, good point. They have to be CE approved. They are a legal requirement in France, CE approved gloves. British rules don't like mandating things, I suppose is the simple answer. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for those comments, Sue. Right, so we have reached the end of the show. Time to wrap up. Now, just before I go, don't forget, it's Bank Holiday weekend, and I have got my 3 crash scene books up available to buy. You'll find them here. I think that's the full list. Where is it? I've just lost the full list of the books. I was just going to pop them up in the comments, and so you can follow the links if you want to. The 3 books are Crash Scene Junction, which, as you probably guessed, covers the... I can't find them. Brilliant. I managed to lose that link as well. Good Lord. Every time I try and think I've got myself completely organized, everything goes to pot. Crash Scene Junction which looks at the SMIDSY crash and explains both the emerging vehicle and the turning in vehicle scenarios and what you can do about it. Crash Scene Corner, which looks at the most common open road crash of the lot, where the rider runs either into the scenery or into an oncoming vehicle, explains how it happens and how to avoid it. And then the third is Crash Scene Overtake, which looks at the other third gotcha that motorcyclists get tricked into, overtaking, which goes wrong. So have a look at the crash scene books. You'll find them on my coffee page, links in the preamble to the show. That's it for today. Thank you very much again for looking in. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully I will see you for the next show. So if you're out there today, make sure that you stay shiny side up, and see you next Sunday for more news, views and biking tips.